My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
So today I'll be discussing how the US media played a role in shaping the perception of the Iraq War. So in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq, marking the start of the conflict. Alongside the US military troops being deployed were journalists being embedded into certain military units. Some prominent journalists at the time who were covering the Iraq War in Iraq alongside the troops was David Bloom of NBC News and Geraldo Rivera of Fox News. These journalists offered a unique perspective because they were reporting directly from the battlefield. But their proximity to the soldiers raised some serious questions, such as were they able to maintain objectivity while talking about the soldiers? And how much they saw was shaped by the military's narrative? Or did they come to that conclusion by themselves? But remember, before the war, George Bush and his political advisors had this to say about Iraq's leadership, Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths, spent enormous sums, taken great risks to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb.
Nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapon.
Active chemical munitions bunkers, mobile production facilities.
We know he's got chemical weapons. He's got them. He's got them. He's got them.
So let's take a look about how Fox News and New York Times, the two biggest news organizations in America, covered the Iraq War during that time period. So on one side, the New York Times took a more analytical approach. They focused on political justifications for the war, such as weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein's rule, and the current administration's case for why they invaded. While on the other side, Fox News emphasized its coverage on patriotism and its support for American troops.
Well, I think we are. I think this. There are three things you can do. One, you can follow the Democrats' point of view, which is to withdraw on a timetable, which is exactly the wrong policy, very injurious to the interests of this country. You can stand pat, which I think is demonstrated that we should not do. Instead, you need to follow a third course, and that means we do reinforce our troops. We work to get control of the situation over there. We try to avoid a situation of chaos, which we will be blamed for, and we begin to move ahead in order to get control of that situation. The American people don't expect us to run. They expect us to, in fact, to act decisively in the American interest.
PJ.
Their coverage often highlighted the bravery of the American troops and their current positions in Iraq and their advancement in the areas. And this coverage often gave the perspective of we're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for democracy, we're fighting to get back at the people who created 9/11, and kind of reasons and justifications to why we should be there in the first place. And the question still remains on how and if the US media changed the perception of how the public feels about the Iraq War. The portrayal of US soldiers and the military as liberators and freedom fighters was very prominent around our media, while the depiction of Iraqi civilians varied depending on which news media outlet was talking about it. Some Iraqi civilians were shown as victims of Saddam Hussein's and Iraq's leadership, while other Iraqis were seen as collateral damage or helping the terrorist or helping Saddam Hussein get away. But either way, at the time, there was no social media, so only the news could inform the people of what was going on during that time. Videos such like this were kept from the public for a long time.
Guys. Watch your eyes.
So as the war progressed, the media's coverage was the only source of information of what was happening from the beginning of the war to the end of the war. The reports from the embedded journalists inside the military in Iraq gave the people a perspective up close of what was happening in Iraq. But those reports were often filtered or changed in order to fit the narrative of the particular news organization who wanted to present that information at that time. And these questions raise concerns on if the full complexity of the war was being objectively covered on all sides. But let's remember, during the Iraq War, the majority of American people believed it was justified according to their beliefs at that time. But now we know over time, beliefs and perspectives can change, just like Bush's perspectives changed as well.
You talked about how you fell to your stomach when you found out there were no weapons of mass destruction. Can you bring me to that moment? Did someone walk in and say, "We've stopped looking, they're not there"?
No,
Who was it? How did that happen?
It just kind of was, it evolved. The fact that there wasn't weapons evolved. I mean, when we first got in there and started looking around and didn't find anything, you get that kind of sinking feeling that, and then time went on, and then we got tips, I'll never forget the tip that there was crates buried, hidden in the Euphrates River. So they found, maybe these are them, and they sent frogmen and there was nothing there. And so,
what is the point of that? Well, the media's role is highlighted during the Iraq War with its major influence on the perception of how things are going and the perception of how the people were perceiving things as well. From the battlefield reports to the nightly news broadcast, we can see that news media's influence is tremendous, and it influences and sways the perception of what they're covering and also the public's.